Crime and Crime Again is a true crime podcast containing subject matter that may be graphic or disturbing. Listener discretion is advised. When the serenity of a peaceful family farm in rural western Kentucky is pierced by a burst of gunshots, no one imagined that a beloved, prominent family in the community was at the receiving end of the gunfire. The horrific truth that would unravel in the following days would rattle the entire town of Cadiz, Kentucky, and at the end of it all, still leave a gaping void of confusion and devastation. The small town of Cadiz, Kentucky is home to about 2,500 people and sits on the far western side of the state, about 20 miles from the Tennessee border. Cadiz became the home of the Champion family in the late 1950s, when the family farm was established. Lindsey Champion grew up with his brother Lauren and sister Lisa right there on the farm. He graduated from Trigg County High School in 1970 and went on to attend Western Kentucky University, where he studied mathematics and business finance, and graduated in 1974. When he was still in high school, Lindsey met Joy Allen, who was 2 years younger than him. In 1972, shortly after she graduated from high school, Joy and Lindsey got married. Joy attended Murray State University, where she studied elementary education and graduated in 1976. Lindsey and Joy tried for a few years to have children, but after suffering 2 miscarriages and the loss of a baby boy, they made the decision to adopt. And in December of 1978, the Champions adopted a baby boy, who they named Ryan. When Ryan was about 5 years old, Joy finally conceived her miracle baby, and on April 29, 1983, Emily Champion was born. Lindsey Champion found his career at the Farm Credit Services office in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. He was with the company for 38 years and retired as the director. Joy Champion taught at Trigg County Elementary School for more than 30 years, and in 2008, she was awarded Educator of the Year by the Cadiz Trigg County Chamber of Commerce. According to everyone who knew the Champions, Lindsey and Joy loved and treated their children equally. To them, Ryan was just as much theirs as Emily was. Family friend Gary Haddock told Investigation Discovery, quote, "They loved those kids as much as anybody could possibly love their children. They just devoted their lives to those children," end quote. But those close to the family noticed over the years that Ryan developed a sense of rivalry toward Emily, and possibly even harbored some resentment for her. This may have had less to do with the fact that Ryan was adopted, and more to do with the fact that Ryan and Emily possessed vastly different personalities and ambitions. The Investigation Discovery show Devil in Suburbia covered this case, and in the episode, family friend Vicki Hendricks said, quote, "Ryan was a handful. He was a ball of fire. He was very assured. You never felt like Ryan was afraid of anything," end quote. She also said, quote, "He was all about Ryan. He was all about looking at it from his point of view," end quote. Where Ryan didn't really have a sense of direction in his life as a young adult, Emily knew from a young age exactly what she wanted to do. Where Ryan was a bit more hot-headed, Emily was more disciplined. Where Ryan was described as a sort of class clown, always looking to have all eyes on him, Emily was quieter, more collected. Vicki Hendricks also told Investigation Discovery, quote, "Ryan and Emily were pretty much at odds with each other. Emily was focused on her efforts to succeed. That was very meaningful for her. For Ryan, it wasn't. He didn't have that focus. He didn't have that drive," end quote. Family members recalled that during their childhood, if Emily received any kind of attention from anyone, Ryan would be quick to try to steal her thunder. For the most part, it was a typical sibling rivalry, born from 2 clashing personalities. Ryan Champion ended up joining the Army in his mid-20s, and this was fully supported by his parents, They hoped that this would provide their headstrong son with a sense of structure and set him on a positive trajectory in life. Ryan served 8 years in the military before being discharged and moving to Oak Grove, Kentucky, about 30 minutes away from his hometown of Cadiz. Emily Champion graduated from Trigg County High School in 2001 and earned a full-ride scholarship to Western Kentucky University. As a junior at WKU, Emily was accepted into Auburn University's College of Veterinary Medicine, where she graduated with her doctorate in 2008. Emily then moved to Sunset, Louisiana, where she specialized in equine medical care at Barron Veterinary Clinic, and she also practiced at Delta Downs Racetrack in Vinton, Louisiana. In late October 2014, Emily was back in Kentucky, visiting with her family for a few days before she was set to return to Louisiana to start a new job. On October 26, 2014, Lindsey and Joy Champion attended church early that Sunday morning, while Emily opted to stay home and rest after running a half marathon the day before. Lindsey, Joy, Ryan, and Emily weren't the only champions residing on the family farm. Lindsey's sister, Lisa Champion, lived right across the road from their home. And on the morning of October 26th, around 11 a.m., she was startled by the sound of several gunshots nearby, but chalked it up to someone possibly doing a little target practice. She did live in the countryside of Kentucky, after all. But shortly after the gunshots rang out, Lisa was alarmed to hear banging on her front door and someone repeatedly yelling her name. When she opened the door, she was met by her nephew, Ryan Champion, frantic and pleading for help, his wrists bound with duct tape. Ryan implored his Aunt Lisa to call 911, but offered little explanation as to why. The only clue he offered up was asking that Lisa request an ambulance to the scene.
What's your emergency? My nephew, Ryan Champion, just came to my door and his wrists have been tied with duct tape, and I haven't been able to find out what's wrong. He doesn't appear to be injured, but I don't know what's happened. Okay, ma'am, where would I be sending the ambulance to? Right across the road. I'm going to go over there with him, okay?
After hanging up with the dispatcher, Lisa cut the duct tape off of Ryan's wrists and they both rushed to her truck to drive across the road to Ryan's family home. When they pulled in and Lisa stepped out of her truck, she asked where everyone was. Ryan gestured toward the house, saying, quote, "They're in there," end quote. When Lisa tried to press him to explain what was going on, Ryan only said, quote, "You don't want to go in there," end quote. When Lisa approached the house, she immediately noticed a bullet hole in the front door. Concerned, but hoping that whatever was going on was nothing more than some sort of accident, Lisa opened the door.
Oh, please, my brother has been shot, and his wife, Joy. My nephew is here, and my niece has been shot.
Lisa stood outside, distraught and confused, while she waited for law enforcement and first responders to arrive. When officers from the Trigg County Sheriff's Department arrived on the scene and entered the Champion family home, they encountered a level of brutality that nothing could have prepared them for. 62-year-old Lindsey Champion was found outside of the house, laying on a concrete landing with gunshot wounds to his head. 31-year-old Dr. Emily Champion was discovered in the living room of the home, having suffered 2 gunshot wounds to the head. Her nose and mouth had been wrapped with duct tape 8 times around, and her hands and feet were bound tightly with duct tape as well. 60-year-old Joy Champion was found in the basement of the home, laying face down with a gunshot wound to her face. But investigators were confused when they discovered a 4th body in the house. A man in his 20s was discovered on the floor in the dining room with a gunshot wound to his head. The man had his ID on him, so he was quickly identified as 22-year-old Vito Riservato. Immediately, the Kentucky State Police were called in to assist with the crime scene and the subsequent investigation. Investigators went back outside of the home to talk to Ryan Champion, the only one of the Champion family to have made it out of the house alive. Investigators tried to ascertain what involvement Vito Riservato had with the Champion family. Ryan told them he had just met Vito for the first time only 3 days before the murders, on October 23rd. Ryan explained to police that he had just hired Vito to help him with some construction work, but that his acquaintance with Vito quickly soured. According to Ryan, when Vito first came to the Champion family home, prepared to help Ryan gather tools for his work, Vito saw Ryan's sister Emily and immediately became disturbingly fixated on her. Ryan told police that Vito made uncomfortable comments about Emily, which led to Vito getting fired just as quickly as he was hired. At the time of the murders, Ryan had recently been evicted from his apartment, and it was assumed that he was living back at home with his parents. Ryan explained that on the morning of October 26, 2014, he was at the house with his sister Emily, showing her how to use a gun to defend herself. Ryan told police that after Vito's disturbing comments, he was scared for his sister and wanted her to be able to protect herself. Ryan stated that his parents had not yet returned home from church, and that he and Emily were sitting in the living room when they heard someone enter the house. Initially, Ryan and Emily thought it was their parents returning home, but as soon as the person rounded the corner, Ryan instantly recognized that it was Vito Riservato, who had barged into the home uninvited, with a pistol in hand. According to Ryan, Vito first approached him with the gun, telling him that if he tried anything stupid, he would hurt Emily. Vito then tied Ryan up with duct tape, before using duct tape to bound Emily to a dining room chair. Shortly after Vito arrived, Lindsey and Joy Champion were pulling up in the driveway. When Vito saw them outside, he began acting erratically, almost panicking. At that point, according to Ryan, Vito ran outside with the gun, and that's when Ryan heard multiple gunshots. Vito ran back inside the house, ran right past Ryan, and immediately went to Emily, shooting her twice in the head while she was still bound to the chair. Ryan explained that after Vito shot Emily, he saw an opportunity to overpower Vito, and he took it, disarming him and subsequently shooting Vito in the head. Vito Riservato's Ford Explorer was found in a wooded area about 200 yards away from the home. Just hours after the bodies of Lindsey, Joy, and Emily Champion, along with Vito Riservato, were found, investigators publicly announced that their primary suspect in the murders was indeed Vito Riservato. On October 27, 2014, the day after the murders, Ryan Champion appeared in a televised interview with local news media, discussing the murder of his family.
Just so I have it spelled correctly, I obviously already have your name, but R-Y-A-N, no surprises on that?
That's correct.
Okay, and the last name?
Champion.
Same. Okay. I guess the first question in all this, I mean, this has been a horrific 24 hours. How are you personally holding up? You seem remarkably composed.
Well, I'm just, I've got one of those mentalities to just soldier through something. Really, that's what's been carrying me through, is that things need to be done. Especially, some people aren't doing so well. And to be honest, I really don't know yet, really, how to feel about any of it. I was kind of at a crossroads of being glad to get out of there, but at the same time, it was horrible.
The same day that Ryan Champion appeared on local news, investigators tracked down Vito Riservato's roommates, hoping to find out more information about their primary suspect. Little is known about Vito's personal life, but what investigators were able to ascertain was that Vito lived with multiple roommates and that he was a single father to a very young son. Vito's roommates told police that Vito was hardworking and that everything he did for his son. At the time of his death, Vito was struggling financially, pretty severely. But a few days before both Vito and 3 members of the Champion family were murdered, Vito's roommates remembered noticing a shift in his demeanor. He seemed happier, hopeful even. When his roommates asked him about his sudden mood change, Vito told them that he had just found a solution to all of his financial problems. Someone had just hired him to do a job that would pay him $30,000. Vito's roommates did not take his claim seriously, thinking he was either joking or about to be very disappointed by some kind of scam. One thing that stood out to investigators was that Vito's roommates told them that they could not wrap their minds around Vito murdering 3 people with a gun. Vito did not like guns. He had once tried going shooting with friends, and after firing 2 shots, he put the gun down. It startled him, and he didn't like holding it. On October 29, 2014, 3 days after the murders, Ryan Champion returned to his family home, the scene of the crime, to do a walk-through reenactment with investigators. The episode of Devil in Suburbia that covered this case shows several minutes of this videotaped reenactment. They spent about an hour and a half inside the house, allowing Ryan to lead them through the sequence of events that day. Ryan became almost immersed in the dramatization of it all, quite literally acting out everything that happened inside that house the day that his family was murdered. Investigators had also brought an airsoft gun that looked and functioned similarly to the actual murder weapon. Ryan sat in a recliner in the living room and recounted to investigators the moment that he and Emily heard the front door open, followed by approaching footsteps. He explained that initially, he and Emily believed it was their parents returning home from church. Moments later, Ryan walked down the hallway toward the living room, holding the airsoft gun, acting out Vito's actions after he entered the home. Ryan stopped at the doorframe and peeked around the corner, concealing the airsoft gun at his side, demonstrating to investigators the way that Vito had greeted him and his sister. At that point, Ryan claimed, Vito quickly became threatening, approaching Ryan with the gun pointed at him, threatening to harm Emily if Ryan tried anything stupid. According to Ryan, Vito told him, quote, "Let's not make this any more messy than we have to be," end quote. Soon, Ryan was standing in the living room holding both the airsoft gun and a roll of duct tape, as 2 investigators sat in chairs, posing exactly as Ryan and Emily were after they were bound. Ryan explained that after Vito had tied them up with duct tape, he heard a vehicle pulling into the driveway, and when he saw that it was Lindsey and Joy Champion returning to the house after church, he became erratic, pacing around, glancing out the window, and muttering expletives to himself. But within moments, Ryan claimed, Vito ran outside, and as Ryan got up out of the chair, hands still bound, he heard several gunshots ring out. Ryan moved the investigators into the hallway, asking one of them to act as Vito. Ryan demonstrated that seconds after the gunshots, Vito ran back inside the house, shoving right past Ryan and into the living room, where he shot Emily Champion twice in the head while she was still duct taped to a chair. According to Ryan, after Vito shot Emily, he had to reload the gun, and that's when Ryan jumped into action. He moved one of the investigators into position, acting out the way that he disarmed Vito while he was attempting to reload. Ryan grabbed the airsoft gun away from the investigator and quickly turned it against him, pointing it at his head to portray the moment when he fired a single shot into Vito Riservato's forehead. As investigators watched Ryan demonstrate the events that took place during the murders, their belief in his innocence started to falter. The reenactment did not sway judgment in his favor, as he likely hoped that it would. One of the most unsettling observations that investigators made during the reenactment was that Ryan was oddly composed. He was inside the home, walking over the exact spots where 3 of his family members died after being shot, and there was not the slightest hint of sadness or grief in his demeanor. After conducting the walkthrough reenactment with investigators, Ryan was taken to the police department for a nearly 2-hour-long interview that eventually evolved into an interrogation. By that point, investigators had already picked up on a few inconsistencies in Ryan's story. Most notably was Ryan's claim that he overpowered Vito while Vito was attempting to reload the gun. Based on the simple math of how many rounds the gun was able to hold and how many shots had already been fired by the time Ryan claimed Vito was reloading, Ryan's statement could not have been accurate. The gun used in the murders held 7 rounds. Lindsey Champion was shot 3 times, and there was 1 live round on the ground near his body. Joy Champion was shot 1 time, and Emily Champion was shot twice, and 2 live rounds were found on the floor beside her. That's 9 rounds. Ryan claimed that after Emily was shot, Vito had to reload the gun, giving Ryan an opportunity to defend himself. But if there were already 9 rounds that were either fired or dropped on the ground, Vito would have had to reload the gun 2 rounds prior to when Ryan said he had to reload. This inconsistency would become a key factor in putting holes in Ryan Champion's story. During the interview at the sheriff's office, investigators asked Ryan if there was anything at all that he was leaving out of his story or anything he needed to tell them, to which Ryan responded, quote, "No, not that I'm aware of," end quote. After investigators pointed out the issue of the number of rounds and Ryan's claim that Vito had to reload only after shooting Emily, Ryan seemed to agree with them, that his own story didn't align with what investigators knew about the crime scene. Ryan said, quote, "I'm not doubting what you all are saying at all. Matter of fact, especially when you explained it, it makes perfect sense. And I know you all know your business, but I also know what I remember. The only logical explanation I see is that I'm missing time, and that's not a normal thing people do," end quote. But when investigators continued to try to press Ryan, even attempting to be more aggressive in their approach, Ryan still did not budge. One investigator said, quote, "Your whole family is dead, and you're alive, Ryan. You got out of there without a mark," end quote. To which Ryan responded, quote, "Some of this, I think, is starting to cross the border into being unreasonable and unfair. And I think that you were bullying in a way, trying to get a rise out of me by smiling and saying my dead family so much," end quote. After the interrogation, Ryan was released. But investigators were determined to prove their burgeoning theory that Ryan Champion murdered his entire family and tried to pin the crime on Vito Riservato. When they started re-examining pieces of evidence from the crime scene, they took particular notice of the duct tape used to bind Emily and, supposedly, Ryan. The roll of duct tape was found at the scene and was collected into evidence, along with the duct tape that was cut from Ryan's wrists before the first responders arrived at the scene. Ryan told investigators that Vito taped him up first because he was a bigger threat than Emily. But when investigators analyzed the duct tape that was wrapped around Ryan's wrists and compared it to the roll of duct tape, they discovered yet another hole in his story. The end of the duct tape roll, where the most recent piece had been ripped off, aligned perfectly with the edge of the tape bound around Ryan's wrists, meaning that the piece of duct tape that was used to bind Ryan's wrists was the very last piece of tape ripped from that roll. Ryan was not the first victim to be bound with duct tape. He was the last. The analysis of the duct tape was enough for investigators to obtain a warrant for Ryan's arrest, based on probable cause. On October 31st, 2014, 5 days after the murders, 36-year-old Ryan Champion was arrested and charged with 4 counts of capital murder and 1 count of capital kidnapping. Not long after his arrest, Commonwealth Attorney G.L. Ovey filed a notice of intent to seek the death penalty. Just days after his arrest, Ryan called in for a phone interview with WKDZ Radio from his cell at the Christian County Jail.
I don't think that there really are words for it. I'm not ready at this time to deal with the immense amount of suffering and loss that this experience has forced on me. I can say that the officer's decision to arrest me on Friday caused me to miss out on a time with my family that I really needed to have. I'll never get that back. I'll never have that time, ever.
On Sunday, November 2nd, 2014, Lindsey, Joy, and Emily Champion were laid to rest beside one another at Lawrence Cemetery in Trigg County. On November 12th, 2014, Ryan Champion was indicted by a grand jury on 3 counts of complicity to commit capital murder, 1 count of capital murder, and 1 count of complicity to commit capital kidnapping. The same day of his indictment, Ryan did another phone interview with WKDZ Radio, once again right from the jail where he sat awaiting trial. Although their primary suspect was behind bars, investigators were not convinced that Ryan acted alone. So they kept digging, hoping to ascertain who else might have been involved in the murder of the Champion family. Investigators recalled that on the day of the murders, while Ryan was being interviewed outside of the house, he claimed that Vito Riservato had quickly become obsessed with Emily. Attempting to add some credibility to his story, Ryan told police that they could speak to a woman named Ann Plotkin, a longtime friend of his. He claimed that Ann would corroborate everything he said about Vito, because Vito was a violent ex-boyfriend of Ann's daughter. As it turned out, investigators did speak to Ann Plotkin on the day of the murders, but at the time, they were looking at her only as a witness with information about the family. Ann was also interviewed by local news media shortly after Ryan's arrest.
I don't understand it. I really don't, because I know Ryan and no. There is no way. I'm going to be there for Ryan no matter what.
Coincidentally, investigators received a tip shortly after Ryan's arrest, informing them that someone who knew both Ryan and Vito had seen them eating together at a Waffle House in Oak Grove, about 30 minutes away from Cadiz, just 5 days before the murders. And, the tipster said, there was a woman with them that the tipster did not recognize. Investigators visited the Waffle House and were able to obtain surveillance footage that corroborated the tipster's story. On October 21st, 2014, shortly before 9 p.m., Ryan and Vito can be seen entering the restaurant together. And minutes later, a third person joins them. That person was identified as Ann Plotkin. Investigators suspected that Ann Plotkin might have been withholding some information about the murders, so they brought her in for further questioning shortly after Ryan's indictment. When investigators sat down with Ann, they were particularly interested in her phone. They wanted to find out whether she had any communication with Ryan or Vito in the days leading up to the murders, and if so, what that communication was about. Once investigators started pressing Ann about her phone and asking if they would find anything incriminating on it, Ann said no. But she then promptly picked up her phone and started frantically tapping at the screen. She was attempting to delete evidence while sitting in the interrogation room across from police. Investigators immediately confiscated Ann's phone and obtained a search warrant for it. They also searched through Ann's social media posts. On November 2nd, 2014, 2 days after Ryan's arrest, Ann posted to Facebook, quote, "Ryan, no matter what anyone says, you will always be number one in my heart. Don't listen to all the small-minded ones. They don't know you like I do. Like all of your real true friends do. Please try to be strong, and remember we are all here for you, no matter what. Love you," end quote. On November 13th, 2014, she posted again, quote, "I miss Ryan so much that it hurts. I know that he didn't do anything wrong. I'm going to go and see him the day after tomorrow. Here's to Team Champion. I know that Ryan would be so touched by everything. I miss and love you, Ryan," end quote. And her very last Facebook post on November 18th, 2014, read, quote, "Why is it so much easier to believe in the lies and rumors? I've known Ryan Champion 20 years. I know he's not guilty. He didn't do anything wrong. For all the people who are talking out their asses about things they know nothing about, you should all be ashamed of yourselves. Ryan has gone through and is going through a lot. Leave him alone," end quote. Soon, investigators began sifting through Ann's phone, and as they combed through text messages and Facebook messages, their suspicions were confirmed. At 9 p.m. on October 22nd, 4 days before the murders, Vito sent a message to Ann on Facebook, saying, quote, "Actually, I'm going to sit out here, and I'm going to keep an eye on them and watch their movement. Try to get a perfect ability to predictability pattern," end quote. There were over 100 messages sent between Ann and Vito and Ann and Ryan. But Ryan and Vito never communicated with each other directly. They would use Ann as their messenger. All of these records made it clear that Ryan Champion, Ann Plotkin, and Vito Riservato worked together to plan the murder of the Champion family. At 11:50 a.m. on October 25th, the day before the murders, Ryan texted Ann saying, quote, he can't be trusted, end quote, referring to Vito Riservato. It seemed that just before they were set to enact their plan, Ryan and Vito's extremely short-lived partnership was deteriorating. Throughout the messages sent between Ryan, Vito, and Anne seemed to be trying to act as a mediator between the two men, as the plan began to look as though it might collapse. It was also made abundantly clear, through the investigation into Anne Plotkin's social media and phone records, that she and Ryan were romantically involved. In early February 2015, Ryan Champion's defense attorney, Tom Osborne, requested to be allowed to withdraw from the case, citing a deteriorating relationship with his client. His request was granted, temporarily leaving Ryan without clear representation. On February 11, 2015, less than 4 months after the murders of the Champion family, 41-year-old Anne Plotkin was arrested and charged with complicity to commit capital murder. Her arrest came after a grand jury indicted her on the charges. For various reasons, the trials for both Ryan Champion and Anne Plotkin were delayed, leaving the rest of Lindsey, Joy, and Emily's family in limbo, awaiting justice for their loved ones. But on December 8, 2016, 2 years after the murders, Ryan Champion pleaded guilty to all charges to avoid the death penalty. On January 27, 2017, the family attended Ryan's sentencing hearing. At the sentencing, Lindsey's brother, Lauren Champion, read his victim impact statement directly to Ryan Champion. Quote, "Early morning, pre-dawn hours, several days after Sunday, October 26, 2014, I woke with a yearning to read the 23rd Psalm in the Old King James. I knew that my son Ethan had left behind his King James Bible from his early school days. After finally finding it, I flipped it open after sitting down. Psalm 37 jumped off the page at me. Long ago, in 6th grade, Ethan had highlighted in bright pink fluorescent highlighter the first 7 verses of Psalm 37. I read, 'Do not fret because of evildoers. Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not fret because of him who prospers in this way, because of the man who brings his wicked schemes to pass.' At this stage of that first week, my initial shock was beginning to wear off. The disbelief that this was all a dream was starting to wear off. But it will never completely wear off. It was being replaced by a fierce, burning, revengeful anger, directed at you." End quote. Lindsey's sister, Lisa Champion, also read her victim impact statement, bravely addressing the man who stole her family away from her. Quote, 26 months and 1 day ago, until mid-morning on October 26, 2014, my life was perhaps boringly routine. I was content with life on the farm. Daily seeing Lindsey and Joy, and following Emily with her horse doctoring journeys on Facebook. Around 11:15 that Sunday morning, Lindsey and Joy's lives were stolen from them. Though not certain of the time Emily was taken, a window of time is assumed. I was not forewarned of what I would discover at the house when that tale was rehearsed to me shortly after 11:15. Listening to the 911 calls, the 2 different ones that I made, it was evident. I discovered the carnage. Perhaps this was the intent, to kill me daily by the images of my family searing into my senses. Continually, daily, the last images of my family here on the farm. Oft I wish I was with them, for the pain is unfathomable." End quote. Later in the statement, she said, quote, "I lost my confidant, Joy. Not just a sister-in-law, but she was a best friend. I could discuss anything with her bluntly, for she and I both share that characteristic, or possibly flaw. Joy. She showered me with leftovers often, because she would say, 'It's not enough for me and Lindsey to have a meal. Here, you take them.' Joy. The one I talked horses with, and shared horse picks with. Joy. The one that I entrusted the care of my big brother, because she had cared for him all these years, and all through the surgeries that he had after his retirement." End quote. Lisa then turned to address Ryan directly, saying, quote, "And I wish to add one thing. You visited my big brother one time in all the times that he was having surgeries. One time. And that one time was because Joy gave you a check." End quote. Lisa then turned away from Ryan and continued her statement. Quote, "Joy entrusted me with the care of her critters when she and Lindsey would be out of town. She had a carefully pinned, written instruction sheet for me that I had memorized. However, she always kept it right there by the dog food and cat food containers. Tragically, that's where Joy died. That's where I found Joy, slumped over those dog food and cat food containers." Emily. Where do I start with her? Little tow-headed rascal that I plopped on a horse for the first time when she was 2 years old. The following year, I introduced her to showing, much to Lindsey's chagrin, but much to Joy's happiness. Emily, the one person that I thought maybe would visit me, if and when I grew to old age. She's gone now. My lifespan has been cut short by the stress imposed upon me because of you. Emily, I'd often send her pictures of ailments that our cows or horses or dogs or cats would have, asking for her advice. Free vet advice. She would return, giving me a diagnosis, cause, and treatment. I don't have that anymore. Lindsey, I lost the big brother who I held on a pedestal. I felt like Lindsey really could do no wrong. That's how much I thought of him. Lindsey was mild-mannered and meek, complete opposite of me. Mama knew that. She told me, "You need to take care of Lindsey." I did my best while he was alive, and it haunts me knowing that somewhere along the line, I failed. Because he died that morning, along with his sweet wife and sweet daughter. Lindsey, he gave me advice, whether I wanted it or not. But it was true. It was true, honest advice. Lindsey was the patriarch of our family, but now he's gone. I have nightmares of my family. I have daymares of my family's deaths. I have guilt if I laugh because I think my family can no longer laugh. I shouldn't be happy about anything. Hearing the name Ryan Lindsey Champion angers me. It angers me because Joy and Lindsey gave him that name as respect for Lindsey, and to possibly carry on the good name of Lindsey Champion. When I hear it now, it cuts to the bone. You ought to be ashamed. How I wish we could force you to change your name. It's bad enough what you did. But hearing those two names, Lindsey Champion, associated with you, is just further salt into our wounds. End quote. Both full victim impact statements can be viewed on YouTube. That day, Ryan Champion was sentenced to 4 life terms in prison without the possibility of parole, to be served at the Eastern Kentucky Correctional Complex in West Liberty, Kentucky. On May 19, 2017, Ann Plotkin also pleaded guilty on the charge of complicity to commit capital murder. She was subsequently sentenced to 22 years in prison at the Kentucky State Reformatory in LaGrange, Kentucky. In early 2019, Ann filed a request to be granted a compassionate release from prison due to a terminal illness. Her request was denied. The day after her request was denied, Ann Plotkin died in prison on February 8, 2019. Lindsey, Joy, and Emily Champion were beloved pillars in their community. Not a single person had a negative thing to say about any of them. They were kind and giving, always willing to help someone in need. They lived a comfortable, colorful life filled with love. A life they enjoyed amidst the tranquility of the farm that they worked so hard to build. And for no discernible reason, their lives were ripped away by the last person they should have had to worry about. Their peaceful home was transformed into something nightmarish. The image of the quaint brick house with the red door, forever memorialized in broadcast crime scene photos, punctuated by the yellow glow of crime scene tape wrapped around the property. Lisa Champion still lives in her home, across the street from where her brother, sister-in-law, and niece suffered unspeakable violence. Not a day passes that she doesn't find her eyes wandering over to that long, curved driveway, or that bright red door, unable to temper the pang of grief in her heart. I know that closure can be somewhat of a myth, but I do hope that Lisa and the rest of Lindsey, Joy, and Emily's family have found some semblance of healing over the years. And I hope that Lisa knows that it's okay to laugh sometimes. It's okay to find those little specks of joy in life. If you'd like to request a case to be covered on the show, you'll find a link to a case request form in the show notes. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel, where you'll find full episodes, complete with photos relevant to each case. You can follow the podcast on X, formerly Twitter, @CrimeAgainPod, on Instagram @CrimeAgainPodcast, and on TikTok @CrimeAgainPodcast. Links to all social media can be found in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode of Crime and Crime Again.